as you walk back, I just want you to take a few moments and look around you. You know, so often we're so rushed in life that we really don't get the opportunity to just take in God's creation. You know, so breathe in the air, take in the sunshine, you know, touch one of the trees. Don't touch poison ivy though. But just take in and experience all this creation that God has given us. The Lord God tells Jeremiah, I brought you to this country of farmland to enjoy its fruits and bounty. But you came and defiled my land. You made my possession abhorrent. So imagine that for a moment. God giving us the perfect land. Think about the Garden of Eden. So what pictures come to your mind? Beautiful trees, plants, rivers perhaps, luscious greenery, and delicious fruit to be picked. God is reminding the Israelites through Jeremiah of the time that God led them out of Egypt, saved them from slavery, and brought them to a land filled with milk and honey. God is constantly reminding the Israelites of the dedication God has to them. In our reading from the Psalms, God implores Israel, how I wish my people would listen to me. How I wish Israel would walk in my ways. I would feed you with the finest wheat. I would satisfy you with honey from the rock. God has been trying to provide for the Israelites and all humanity from the beginning of creation. But again and again, we don't listen to God's voice. Psalms reiterates this. We follow our own willful hearts and our own advice. Now, the book of Jeremiah dates back to the late 600 BCE, so that's well over 2,500 years ago. But God's words are still so true and relevant today. Don't we all struggle with following the ways of God instead of following our own advice? Haven't we all been given this earth to enjoy its fruit and bounty? But what have we done with it? We have defiled it, just as the Israelites did so long ago. And to see an example of this, we just have to look at our beach. The ocean is overflowing with trash. Plastic is destroying the water all around us. And what does it mean to our faith and to our community when our waterways are polluted by industrial and agricultural runoff, and governments have prioritized the needs of corporations over the safety of citizens? Jeremiah tells us that the Israelites have forsaken God, who is the fount of living waters. Now, all denominations in Christianity recognize baptism as a sacrament. It is of God. And as United Methodists, we see baptism as a means of grace. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River and told his disciples, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. But in her book, Loving Water Across Religions, the author, Elizabeth McNally, says that while the symbolic dimensions of water are important, the materiality of water is just as important. Indeed, without the material substance of the baptismal waters, this symbolic meaning of baptism could not exist. But it's not just water that Christians find sacred. It's living water. And living water is different from standing water. It's water that's running, such as the river, the ocean, this pond right here that's fed from the stream that we just passed. In the 4th chapter of John, Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at a well. And they exchange words, and Jesus tells the woman, if you recognize God's gift and who is saying to you, give me some water to drink, you'd be asking him, and he would give you living water. Everyone who drinks this well water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks from the water that I will give will never be thirsty again. The water that I give will become in those who drink it a spring of water that bubbles up into eternal life. Jesus is telling us that he is the living water. But what does it say when humanity is destroying our living water that our faith deems as sacred? When we defile God's creation, we defile God. Our faith is tied to water, just as our community here is tied to water. I used to think that all the plastic that I used got recycled. I use it, I wash it, put it in the recycle bin, and poof, magically it gets recycled into something else. But in reality, that doesn't happen. Most of the plastic we use doesn't get recycled. It ends up in our water, in our oceans. It ends up in those living waters. 33 million tons of plastic is discarded every year in the United States, but only 3 million tons is successfully recycled. So if you do the math, that's only 9%. And it's not just a problem here in the United States. Just a little over 90% of the estimated amount of plastic waste ever made, has never been recycled. 90% of plastic has never been recycled. So I always assumed that plastic eventually broke down and was biodegradable. I figured it took a long time, but eventually it would go away, right? But that's not the case. Plastic does break down, but it never goes away. It breaks into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually turning into what could be described as a plastic dust, or microplastics. And when plastic is ingested by marine life, it has all sorts of harmful effects. It can actually fill up their stomach and end up killing them. Animals don't eat because their bellies are full, but they're not full of food, they're full of plastic. So they actually end up starving because they're not getting the nutrients that their bodies need. And if this doesn't happen, the toxics from the microplastics get absorbed into their muscles and tissues, poisoning not only them, but the entire food chain, and then ultimately humanity. So whenever you eat fish, chances are you're probably ingesting some of those toxins. But it's not just our water that we're destroying. The Amazon rainforest in Brazil is on fire. It's been on fire for months. In 2019 alone, there have been over 80,000 fires started in an attempt to spread deforestation. And it's pretty easy to discard this because, unlike plastic in the ocean, the Amazon rainforest is not in our backyard. We don't see it every day. It's not right in our face. But this is serious. The entire ecosystem of the planet depends on this rainforest. The Amazon is so vast that its benefits affect us on a global level. And so its destruction affects us on a global level. As the trees take in carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. And I don't have to tell you all why oxygen is so important to us. The Amazon actually pulls greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. The same greenhouse gases that are causing our planet to warm. And without the rainforest in the Amazon, the change to our climate is coming more rapidly. Now, these fires aren't starting naturally. They're being set on purpose in an effort to create more land for grazing cattle. So this was something that I learned. Brazil is the top exporter of beef. So just as in the Psalms, God is letting us follow our own desires and pursue our own devices, even to the destruction of creation. So there are some people that are going to make a huge profit off of the destruction of the rainforest. People that are raising cattle now have a whole lot of land to raise that cattle. But to what end? So I want to do a breathing exercise with you. And this was taught to me by one of my professors, Dr. Laurel Kearns at Drew University. And you got a little bit of a taste of it in our call to worship. So, I want you to take a deep breath, a breath of God's breath, a plant and animal breath, of each other's breath, and now exhale it slowly. You have all just engaged in an interspecies ritual of communion. Now take another breath. After all, our lives depend on it. And exhale. Just like we recognize how essential it is to breathe, we must recognize that air is sacred. It is the essence of life. Okay, now if you can, follow me. We're going to breathe in on Yah and out on Way. You have just breathed the breath of Yahweh. And Yahweh is the name of God. That's the Hebrew name of God. So you have all just breathed the breath of God. We are all connected on this planet, all part of creation, from humans to trees, to fish in the sea, to birds in the sky. Chapter 1 of Genesis, we are told, prosper, reproduce, fill the earth, take charge. Be responsible for the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, for every living thing that moves on the face of the earth. God is commanding us from the very beginning of creation to care for the earth around us. We must put aside our own willful hearts and personal desires for the sake of our survival. Caring for creation is about living in community with creation, all of creation. I don't know about you, but I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to live in a world that is beautiful and healthy, not desolate and decaying. I want future generations to inherit a planet that is growing and thriving. And now here I've only talked about 2 examples of how humanity is negatively impacting the earth, but there are countless more. But instead of preaching an entire sermon of doom and gloom, I'm going to leave you on a positive note. I'm going to tell you what you as individuals can do to help. And these are pretty simple things. They may seem small, but if everybody participates, they'll have a much larger impact. So 1, we call these the 3 R's, and Charlie knows them. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I like to stress reduce, which may be the harder option of all 3, but it does have the most impact. So reduce. If we reduce our use of plastic, if we don't use plastic, it can never make its way into our ocean. So 2 of the best and probably easiest ways to reduce your plastic use is to cut out bottled water. And I know it seems really hard, right? We carry around bottled water with us all the time. Bottled water, along with their caps, and also straws, are 2 of the most commonly used plastics, and they are found in an abundance in the ocean. So instead, reusable bottles, water bottles, right? It's really easy, just fill them up, put them in the fridge, reuse them. When you're out at a restaurant, if they don't have paper straws, and I know some people don't like paper straws, I see my mom looking at me right here, she does not like paper straws. If you go out to a restaurant, just ask to have your drink without a straw. And I know some person in our congregation, Miss Carol over there, orders for the whole table. So when we go out to eat, she says, oh, and none of us need straws. But it makes an impact. All right, so reduce, reuse, and recycle. Next, you can volunteer for a beach or community cleanup. So as you heard this morning, our church is sponsoring a beach cleanup and recycle walk next weekend. So mark your calendar, September 28th, 11 a.m. in Strathmere. We have registration forms available. See Bill or I. It's free. Doesn't cost anything but a little time and effort. And you get out in nature, you know? Enjoy the weather. It's not going to be this nice for very much longer. It's a great way to spread awareness and education, which leads me to my next point. You can educate others. So now, after this great sermon, you all know the impact that we're having on our environment. So share it with a friend. Next, make reusable shopping bags a habit. So instead of using plastic bags at the store, some of which now you're getting charged for, take reusable bags with you. We just had a green fair yesterday and we were giving out reusable shopping bags. If you didn't get a chance to stop by, we've got them in the narthex. Take one on your way out, grab a bag and start using it. You can also use energy efficient appliances. So buying and using energy efficient light bulbs are a really easy example of this, and literally anybody can do it. Energy efficient appliances reduce the greenhouse gases that enter our atmosphere. Like I said before, that's really important since we're losing so much of the rainforest on a daily basis. Okay, now I know this next one's going to sound a little hippie-ish of me. Plant a tree. But seriously, it would take over 10 million years. 10 million years, now that's longer than humanity has been on this planet. 10 million years to replace the ecosystem that we've lost in the Amazon. But every tree matters. And I just heard recently that the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago. But the next best time to plant a tree is right now. So if each person plants a tree, I mean, look how many trees we have. So my last one, bike, walk, or carpool. So last month, we went out to California to visit my brother. And I got to ride in my brother's Tesla. I had no idea what a Tesla was before this. So if you're like me, had no idea. Tesla is a super nice, super fancy, fully electronic car. Super nice, but also super expensive. So if you're like me, can't afford a Tesla, you can walk. You ride your bike, you can carpool. So take a look around you. Take a moment to appreciate the beauty of God's creation. This is God's garden, because God is a gardener. We have made quite a mess of things, but we can also be the solution. So I want to leave you now with the words of St. Augustine. Some people, in order to discover God, read books. But there is a great book, the very appearance of created things. Look above you. Now look below you. Note it. Read it. God, whom you want to discover, never wrote that book with ink. Instead, he set before your eyes the things that he had made. Can you ask for a louder voice than that? And all God's people said, Amen.